Corporal James Mitchell sat alone in the mess hall, watching his squad eat together at the far table, laughing, sharing photos of family back home, trading stories about siblings, parents, Thanksgivings that felt like distant memories. James had no photos to share, no stories about home, because he'd never had one. Foster care from age 6, 12 different homes by 18. Never stayed anywhere long enough to call it family. The day he turned 18, he aged out of the system with a duffel bag, $200, and nowhere to go. The Army became his home. His squad became his family. Maybe too much. Mitchell's too attached. Sergeant Carson had said during a training evaluation. Gets emotional about his team. That's a liability in combat. Clouds judgment. James had heard it, pretended he hadn't, but the words stung because they were true. He loved his squad, loved them in a way that scared him. The desperate, protective love of someone who lost everything before and refused to lose anything again. Then came the ambush in Kandahar, and that attachment became the only reason 3 men came home alive. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe so you never miss these true tales of courage, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? James Mitchell's earliest memory was standing in a social worker's office at age 6, holding a trash bag with everything he owned. His mother had disappeared 3 days prior. His father was never in the picture. "You're going to stay with the Hendersons for a while," the social worker had said with practiced kindness. "They're very nice." They were nice for 6 months. Then their own grandson moved in, and there wasn't room anymore. Next came the Robinsons, then the Garcias, then the Thompsons. Each home promised stability. Each one ended eventually. Budget cuts, family changes, children who needed the room more. James learned early not to unpack completely, not to put photos on the wall, not to call anywhere home because it never lasted. He learned to be quiet, agreeable, low maintenance, the kind of kid who didn't cause problems, didn't ask for much, didn't take up space that rightfully belonged to someone else. By age 16, he'd stopped trying to connect, stopped hoping each new family would be different, just counted days until 18, when the system would release him and he could finally stop pretending. Temporary felt permanent. The day after his 18th birthday, James stood outside a recruitment office. The Army promised structure, purpose, a place to belong. Basic training was hard, but James had survived harder. Physical challenges didn't scare him. It was the emotional stuff, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the way drill sergeants talked about taking care of your battle buddies, that terrified him. Because James had never learned how to be part of something, how to trust that people wouldn't leave. His squad in Afghanistan became the first family he'd ever chosen. Sergeant Mike Carson, their squad leader, gruff but fair, the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthday. Private Luis Rodriguez, the joker who could make anyone laugh even on the worst days. Specialist Emma Chen, sharp and competent, who treated James like the little brother she'd never had. Corporal Devin Wright, steady and calm, who'd once stayed up all night talking James through a panic attack when the memories got too heavy. For the first time in his life, James felt like he belonged somewhere, to someone. Maybe that's why Carson's evaluation hurt so much. Too attached. Liability in combat. James had joined the Army to find a family, and now they were telling him that loving his squad, caring about them, protecting them made him weak. He tried to pull back after that, tried to be more distant, professional, but it didn't work. Because when Devin got hit by shrapnel and James carried him to the medevac, tears streaming down his face, he realized something. His attachment wasn't a weakness, it was the reason he'd never leave anyone behind. The patrol had been routine. Kandahar province, clearing a village, establishing presence. Standard operations they'd done 100 times before. James walked rear security, eyes scanning rooftops and alleyways, rifle ready. Carson led at point. Rodriguez and Chen covered flanks, right-handled. COMMS. Everything was normal until it wasn't. The first RPG hit without warning, slamming into the wall behind them and showering the squad with debris before James could react. Gunfire erupted from 3 positions: rooftop, alleyway, second-story window. They were trapped in a kill zone. Contact. 3 sides. Carson's voice cut through the chaos. Fall back to the compound. Move. They ran. James felt rounds snapping past his head. Heard the whine of bullets impacting walls inches from his body. Training took over: move, shoot, communicate, survive. They made it to an abandoned compound. throwing themselves behind the walls as enemy fire intensified. Carson was on the radio immediately, calling for backup, coordinates, casualty report, Wright's hit. Chen's voice cracked with panic. James turned. Devin was on the ground, blood spreading across his leg, face pale with shock. James scrambled to him, pulling his med kit. Stay with me, Devin. Stay with me. I'm good. I'm good. Devin's voice was tight with pain. Just patch it, and I can still shoot. James worked fast tourniquet, pressure bandage, morphine. His hands shook but held steady. This was Devin, his brother, not a casualty, not a statistic. We need medevac now. James shouted to Carson. Already called, ETA 15 minutes, 15 minutes, an eternity in a firefight. The enemy fire intensified. They were pushing closer, trying to overrun the compound before help arrived. We can't hold this position. Rodriguez yelled over the gunfire. They're flanking. Carson's face was grim. We hold until evac gets here. No one gets left. The second RPG hit the compound wall. The explosion threw James backward, ears ringing, vision blurred. When he looked up, the world was smoke and chaos, and Carson wasn't moving. James crawled through the smoke toward Carson's position. His squad leader was alive, but unconscious, a gash across his forehead bleeding heavily, shrapnel wounds across his chest. Carson's down. James shouted. Chen appeared beside him, face streaked with dust and sweat. Rodriguez is hit too. Leg wound, can't walk. James's mind raced. 3 wounded, enemy closing in. Back up 15 minutes out, maybe longer if fire was too heavy for the birds to land. They couldn't carry everyone at once. The compound was being overrun. He had a choice, the kind of choice that haunts soldiers forever. Leave someone behind. Save who you can. But James had been left behind his whole life. In every foster home, every temporary placement. Every time he'd been told there's no room anymore. He promised himself he'd never do that to anyone else. Chen, cover fire. James grabbed Carson, hooking his arms under the sergeant's shoulders. I'm getting him to the fallback position. James, you can't carry. Watch me. Carson was 180 pounds of dead weight. James was 165. But adrenaline and desperation don't follow physics. He dragged Carson 50 meters to the secondary position and alley. That offered better cover, a line of sight for evacuation. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. His lungs burned. Muscle screamed. He dropped Carson behind cover and ran back. Rodriguez was conscious but pale, trying to return fire with shaking hands. James, man, you gotta leave me. Shut up. James grabbed him the same way. I'm not leaving anybody. The second trip was harder. His legs trembled. His back felt like it was tearing apart. Rodriguez tried to help, tried to push with his good leg, but mostly James just dragged him while Chen laid down suppressing fire. Bullets snapped past James's head. One grazed his shoulder, burning hot, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. 50 meters, 40, 30. He collapsed beside Carson. Rodriguez safe, but James's body screaming for oxygen. Devin still back there. Chen shouted. James looked up. Wright was still in the compound, still wounded, still alone. The enemy was less than 20 meters from overrunning that position. James's legs were jelly. His arms felt like they'd been torn from his shoulders. Every breath was fire. But Devin was his brother, and James had already decided nobody gets left behind. He stood up, legs shaking, vision swimming. James, you can't. Chen grabbed his arm. You're about to collapse. Then I collapse after. He pulled free. Cover me. The third trip was the one that shouldn't have been possible. James ran back into hell, bullets striking all around him. Enemy fighters visible now through the smoke. Chen's rifle cracking behind him, providing what cover she could. He reached Devin, grabbed him, lifted him, and his legs almost gave out. Devin was the biggest guy in the squad, 200 pounds easy, and James had nothing left. Leave me. Devin gasped. James, brother, you can't. Stop talking. Save your energy. James took one step, then another. The world narrowed to just forward motion, just the next step. Just don't fall. Bullets hit the ground beside his feet. A round punched through his vest, stopped by the plate, but knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled, but didn't fall. 10 more. Steps 5. He collapsed in the alley, Devin falling beside him, both of them gasping for air. Chen was there immediately, dragging them deeper into cover. You insane son of a, you did it. James, you actually did it. James couldn't speak. could barely breathe, but his squad was together, all of them alive. The medevac arrived 3 minutes later. They were extracted under heavy fire, Chen and James providing cover while the wounded were loaded. As the helicopter lifted off, James looked down at his 3 brothers bleeding, wounded, but alive. And for the first time in his life, James Mitchell understood what family really meant. It meant nobody gets left behind, ever. Sergeant Carson woke up in the field hospital 2 days later. James was sitting beside his bed, arm in a sling from the bullet graze, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Mitchell, Carson's voice was rough. They told me what you did. James shrugged. Just got everyone out. You carried me 50 meters while taking fire. You would have done the same. Then you went back. Twice more. For Rodriguez and Wright. Carson's eyes were bright. The medic said you were running on nothing. Should have collapsed. Probably should have died. James didn't respond. What was there to say? Carson reached out, grabbed James's hand. You remember what I wrote in your evaluation about being too attached? Yeah, I was wrong. Carson's voice cracked. Your attachment is the reason I'm alive. The reason all of us are alive. You didn't leave us behind because you love this squad too much to lose anyone. That's not a weakness, brother. That's why you're the best soldier I've ever served with. James's throat tightened. I couldn't leave you. Any of you? I know. Carson squeezed his hand. And that's why you're family. Real family. The kind that doesn't leave when things get hard. 2 weeks later, James stood in the base commander's office while Colonel Morrison pinned a silver star on his chest. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy." But the words that mattered came after the ceremony, when Rodriguez, Chen, and Rightal recovered enough to walk surrounded James in a group hug that lasted longer than regulations probably allowed. You're stuck with us now, Rodriguez said, grinning through tears. Brothers for life, man. No getting rid of us. Double quotes. Wouldn't want to, James replied quietly, because he finally understood. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who you'd run into fire for, who you'd carry when they couldn't walk, who you'd refuse to leave behind no matter what it cost. And James Mitchell, the kid who'd spent his childhood being left behind, had become the man who would never abandon anyone. James sat on his bunk 6 months later, reading a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from a social worker, Mrs. Patricia Dawson, the same woman who placed him in foster homes 20 years ago. Dear James, I saw your story in the news, the Silver Star, the 3 soldiers you saved. I wanted you to know something. When you were in the system, I used to worry about you. You were always so quiet, so self-contained. I wondered if you'd ever learn to trust anyone, to love anyone. Now I know you did, and you loved them enough to risk everything. You became the kind of man who saves people. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry we couldn't give you the family you deserved. But it looks like you found one anyway. With love, Mrs. Dawson. James folded the letter carefully and looked around the barracks. Carson was reading at his desk. Rodriguez and Chen were arguing about something trivial. Ray was asleep, snoring softly. His family, not perfect, not traditional, but real. That evening, Carson called a squad meeting. Mitchell, we've been talking, all of us. James looked up, confused. About what? You don't have anywhere to go for Thanksgiving, right? When we rotate home. I usually just. My mom's cooking. Carson interrupted, and she said if I don't bring you home, she's going to kick my ass. Rodriguez's abuela already claimed you for Christmas. Chen's parents want you for New Year. Wright's family is fighting for spring break. James stared at them. You what? Your family. Man, Rodriguez said simply, and family doesn't spend holidays alone. For the second time in his life, James Mitchell cried in front of his squad. But this time, nobody looked away. Nobody felt uncomfortable. They just pulled him into the kind of hug that said, you belong here. You always have. And we're never letting you go. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who you choose, who you fight for, who you refuse to leave behind no matter the cost. James Mitchell spent his childhood learning what it felt like to be abandoned, and he spent his adulthood making sure no one he loved ever felt that way again. That's not a weakness. That's the purest form of strength there is. Subscribe so you never miss these stories of chosen family and unbreakable bonds. Tell us in the comments, who's your chosen family? Who would you carry through fire? Sometimes the people who've lost everything are the ones who fight hardest to keep everyone else together.